Welcome to Pallilo Points. I'm Brandon Strange of Sports Map Houston. He's Charlie Pallilo, ESPN 97.5, 92.5. If you have not yet, please hit subscribe on the channel. And hey, hit like on the video. We appreciate that too. Charlie, I want to talk some Astros with you. Heading into the Orioles series, the Astros had a bullpen ERA of 2.63 over 27 games, which was the best in MLB. But those of us who watch closely over the entirety of the first half understand that those numbers have a little bit of context to them. Specifically, when we're talking about close games, the Astros are 13-13 in games decided by 2 runs or fewer. A couple of usual suspects that kind of come to mind. Brandon Bielak carrying a 6.21 ERA. Brooks Raley, a 5.86 ERA. The good news for Astros fans is there seem to be a lot of guys returning that can maybe help bolster this pitching staff. Who specifically, outside of these guys returning, like Abreu and Baez we're hearing, and maybe even Austin Pruitt finally maybe joining the group, who out of these guys do you see as pieces that can help buoy this pitching staff?
Throw in Josh James as one more on the recovery trail. Look, Pedro Baez was a 2-year, $12.5 million investment, luring him from the Dodgers at market rate. He was the major bullet fired by James Click in the offseason to fortify the bullpen. Probably secondarily was Joe Smith coming back after having opted out last season. I don't know, cause and effect. Joe Smith sitting out, use it or lose it, and he's lost it, but he was terrible and now injured. Baez has been largely invisible. COVID, then the injury problem with the arm. Great at Dodger Stadium, career ERA under 2. ERA everywhere but pitcher-friendly Dodger Stadium, 4.45 or thereabouts. So not that a healthy Pedro Baez would be an automatic, but he was signed to be the 8th inning guy, right? He was going to be the primary setup guy, I think, for Ryan Pressly. So Christian Javier, who's being used in a multi-inning role rather than one day after the other in the 7th or 8th inning, I still think he's the most talented arm out there apart from Pressly. But if Baez gets healthy and is right, I think he gets the first crack at being the number 1 setup guy.
And regarding some of those guys that are on the cusp of returning, Brett Strom told the media this week that the order in which these guys are going to return aren't necessarily by availability, but by need, whether that's if they need high leverage guys, if they need long relief guys, etc. Riddle me this, Charlie. What type of bullpen help do they not need right now? Because it seems like they need any and all help that they can get. What do you make of those comments?
Yeah, a little gobbledygooky, actually, because who are the, high leverage guys as opposed to who are the multi-innings guys? To me, they're just all lumped in one pot of guys who are question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. And if you're getting linked from starters, right, you're not thinking of bullpen going in every night of, who's coming in the 4th or 5th inning that we're going to use for 3 innings. If one turn through the rotation, Javier is that guy. Right, the big issues in the bullpen are who are your 7th, 8th inning guys, or maybe your 6th, 7th, 8th inning guys. And I would say one way of framing this, if you're an Astros fan and you have a week's pay, much less your life riding on it, and it's 3-2 Astros going to the 8th inning, and you are not allowed to use Pressly until the 9th, other than perhaps Javier, who in the heck would you trust? And I think the answer is, among the guys on the roster or the guys recovering, about this point, it's nobody. So it is their exposed Achilles heel. Hopefully they can bandage it up enough to avoid a real rupture when it matters most.
All right, well, you brought up Christian Javier, so let's talk about him. And we've done that quite a bit on this channel, specifically you and I. We've seen Christian Javier now be used in that bullpen piggyback role. And we also know that Javier is a guy who seems to pitch himself into rhythm when he comes into a game, which doesn't bode well when you're bringing him in with less room for error, either because there's guys on base already or because there are fewer innings left for your offense to pick you up if you make mistakes. So in a small sample size, do you think so far they've used Javier correctly in that role?
I really think that's kind of on-the-job training for both Javier in that role and for the Astros feeling out how best to use him. Ideally, you don't want him having to come into a game as early as the 5th inning, but when he does, and if he's had 2-3 days rest, you're thinking, all right, he can give you 3 good innings, 4 good innings. You know, that darn Shaky had to start pitching well, And that clutters the mix as to, well, maybe there's a guy you move out of the rotation, be it for a Javier return, or you have your 5 guys if the rest of them stay healthy. But Odorizzi was working 14 consecutive scoreless innings. So at least he has really injected himself into the viable starter. So if it is Luis Garcia because of youth, because of flexibility of arm, not because he's earned the demotion from the rotation, maybe that is the silver bullet who'll be added to the chamber for the Astros bullpen.
One last question for you, Charlie, is given the fact that you've got all these guys that are coming back, there's a lot of guys that you mentioned a few, considering all of that they have, considering the fact that they do have that abundance at starting pitching where they can push guys like Javier and maybe Garcia or Odorizzi or whoever the odd men out are into the bullpen to help in long relief. Do you think they have enough to not make a move by the deadline for an arm?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to feel it's imperative. How many, surefire, year-to-year, consistent relief pitchers get to the market? One name who might have become interesting, Brad Hand, the Nationals closer, who's a lefty, who's a free agent after this year if you didn't want to take on any salary beyond 2021. But now the Nationals are on fire. Kyle Schwarber's hitting a home run every day, and the Nationals are thinking, hey, this is like 2 years ago when we beat the Astros in the World Series. We're not selling. If anything, we're buying. So unless it's that lights-out guy, and I guess for the most part, if you're a lights-out guy, you're a closer, right? You're not a 6th or 7th inning guy. So will there be someone, and if he's making any meaningful salary as they're trying to dance below the collective bargaining tax line, I don't think it's neglectful if they don't make a trade unless we knew, you could have gotten this guy and all it would have cost you was that. But I think with the starter to the pen fortification that will be coming for October baseball, they shouldn't feel completely comfortable playing a Pat Hand rather than adding a Brad Hand. But if the lineup's doing its business and you have starting pitching averaging 6 innings, and then you're adding 2 of your starters to that bullpen to bridge you to Presley, they feel like they can beat anybody in a best of 7. The flip side of that coin is anyone else can beat them in a best of 7 or a best of 5. It's how baseball works. See series with the Tigers and maybe even the Orioles.